What problems do modern men face? Being treated like second-class parents pretty much everywhere they go. I've told the story on Reddit before, but the double standard is disgusting. My wife passed away when our kids were very young. One was 2 and the other were about 11 months. Everywhere I went, I would get comments about, "Oh, daddy's day with the kids, huh?" But the absolute worst was when I took them out to eat one night. We got seated and waited for a good 15 minutes. Finally, the server comes over and goes, "Did you want to try to order, or should we wait for mom?" It wasn't crowded. Realized from her use of the words "try to order" that she just deemed me incapable of knowing what to order for my kids. I was mad, so I said to her, "Well, we'd be waiting a long time." She's gone. This has been years ago, but it hasn't changed. There was a thread on Reddit not terribly long ago where some med student was talking about how she cringes whenever she sees a dad at a pediatric appointment because she just knows he's not going to know anything, and it had thousands of upvotes. I told her I hope she learned some better bedside manner before finishing med school than to cringe at anyone taking care of their kids. The double standard in parenting is wild. That med student needs to shadow him for a week. She'd learn more about parenting than she would about cringeworthy diagnoses. Story 2. I feel like when a guy has a problem, he doesn't really have anyone to talk to. You have those alpha guys who try to tell you that your problems aren't real or that you just need to hit the gym frequently for them to go away. On the other hand, we have people who say men should open up more about their feelings, but I think neither men or women have ever been taught how to handle an emotional man, so it comes across as awkward. Also, some people say that we should open up more but aren't interested in helping you. They just say it because, duh, it's so simple to solve your problem. Story 3. A program on the BBC interviewed an author who wrote a book about why the average bloke does weird things, like not wearing sunscreen for the first 3 days on vacation. The interviewer asks him what he thinks about the government proposing the government appointing a minister of men to deal specifically with men's issues, such as a high depression rate. He says, "I feel like we're not allowed to even have these discussions." Not even a minute later, 2 of the women on the panel start saying, "What about all the men who mistreat women? What about the pay gap? How about we fix those before we start pretending men have issues?" That's the gist, at least. It's wild, and it gets the point across about what it feels like to be a man. To be told that we don't share our feelings and then for nobody to care when you try. Story 4. Managing financial stability amidst economic uncertainties is a pressing concern for many modern men. Currently working full-time at a Big Four and doing a master's on the weekends, my salary is gone after the 10th day of getting paid. It's impossible to save money in this economy while paying all the monthly costs alone, trying to eat healthy and saving for future emergencies. I've developed insomnia because I just can't fall asleep without thinking about how to pay the bills. It's currently at a stage where I'm like, "Oh, I slept 3 hours. This was a good night." And then spend the next 13 hours at the office. And I wish this was my only issue. Went to the psychologist this year for the first time. Apparently, I've had anhedonia since I was a kid. Can't keep going to the psychologist because it's too expensive and the insurance only covers 15%. I stopped thinking about the future because there's nothing in the future that creates joyful thoughts. I'm only gaslighting myself that getting a master's will help me in the future, and this keeps me occupied. Turning 29 in April. This was not the life I wanted and expected when I was a kid. Every day is the same repetition of the previous day. Story 5. The short-circuiting of our brains through social media. Our brains never evolved with this level of connectedness in mind. As a result, the innate need to compare oneself to another is turned up to 11 through hyperexposure, leading to many ailments. Affects both men and women, but differently. Story 6. Loneliness and depression. Men are told to figure things out on their own at a very young age, and if men ask for help, then men are viewed as being weak and unattractive. Also, when men do ask for help, they're not taken seriously and become even more isolated. Men are demonized for lashing out after bottling it in and not being able to express themselves. Men are told we need to control or ignore our anger or emotions when, in reality, our body or mind is telling us we need help and we need someone to talk to. People don't realize when women become unhappy or depressed, they cry, but when a man becomes unhappy or depressed, they become angry and lash out. People see that anger and shun men for their misbehavior, but in reality, it's just men crying out for help. There's no empathy or sympathy when a man messes up because he's a man and should figure it out, ignore their feelings. And with cancel culture, this makes it even worse. Instead of empathizing with men who cry out for help, society just ignores them. Story 7. Lack of prospects to find romantic affection is a big one. Love, despite what some people will say, is ultimately a need and not a want. Years, for many men, of inability to find a girlfriend results in lower self-esteem, lack of purpose, loneliness, repression, anxiety, etc. I know that a lot of people make fun of lonely guys, but I guarantee that if those people had actually experienced loneliness to the degree that many modern men have, they wouldn't be so glib. Story 8. You cannot be a victim as a man, yet in today's world, you're also supposed to talk about things you feel or experience. If you do and you're a man, you'll either be told to suck it up or be reminded that men made the patriarchy or whatever, and no pity should be spared. There's a lack of support emotionally because men have been taught to accept the short end of the stick as truths of life rather than something to talk about and work through. Our idea of close friends often doesn't even include people we can confide in regarding our mental health. Because you're bigger or stronger, you're always the instigator and aggressor in any conflict, no matter how it happened. And you just have to take it on the chin, because that's how everyone treats you. If you aren't actively doing something to make money or create something for later, then you have no value as a man. Who you are is valued very poorly. Just because you're a man, it hollows you out to not be doing anything for even a moment because that's your self-worth. You'll go weeks to several months at a time without physical contact with another person in any kind of platonic embrace. You probably can remember the last time you got a hug, but how recent was it? Being touch-starved adds to the loneliness, but that one hug can melt the darkness away. You have to avoid accidental eye contact with women in public spaces out of fear of causing unwanted discomfort. This adds to the isolation. You probably have not cried in several months, if not a year. It was taught to you that you're not allowed to cry because you're a man and men do not cry. Men do not show emotion. You bottle it up, but you cannot let it show either. The depression statistic continues to rise. Almost all men receive their first flowers at their funeral. Story 9. The fact that their fathers grew up in a world where all they had to do was graduate high school and get a job, and they could reasonably expect a house and wife and kids. That world doesn't exist anymore. The economy or housing market isn't like that. Women want partners who can tune in and be emotionally available. Modern men have little to no resources to deal with this new world, and often turn to reactionary figures and become tater tots. Story 10. Saw a Redditor post today about how she touched her favorite DJ's abs because his shirt was open, and he came down to the rail to say hi to the fans. No matter how many people told her, she didn't seem to comprehend that touching someone without their consent is generally not okay. This seems to happen to a lot of guys. The part where people don't understand that it isn't okay to touch anyone, no matter their gender, without their permission. I really do hope that it changes in society soon. Story 11. Sins of our fathers. Millennia of cruelty has gone unpunished. Now we have generations of justifiably angry women who want only two things. It boils down to bodily autonomy and the right to self-determination. That's legit and absolutely worth supporting and defending. Then there's those who feel a man should somehow be extra nice to them while the man is angrily being used as a whipping post for what some other schmucks did. I was born into this BS just like you. I've experienced all of it just like you, and I don't support it. I rail against it, but yeah, don't believe me. It's a tough situation. It's like everyone's playing a giant game of who hurt women the most, and the prize is more anger. Nobody wins. Story 12. To all the people here saying mental health is a big thing, I just wanted to let you know that I am a therapist whose focus is on working with men and boys. I'm part of a research group at my university that studies the psychology of men and masculinity. We publish in academic journals and do presentations, etc. There are people out there trying to get things going even though we're not there yet. Your struggles are real and important. And there are those of us that are out there trying to work with it. Story 13. Lack of engagement with other males. I haven't had somebody call me for a beer or watch a game in years. I'm the one always reaching out. It's demoralizing and negatively contributes to my mental health. There's just no effort with the males I'm around, and I don't know how to be a better friend. No engagement. I'm doing the calling, picking dates and times and events. If I turned my phone off, nobody would check up. Nobody else is trying to go out of their way. Being ghosted for months by people who would show up at my funeral and live a block away, then blame it on being busy. One friend I haven't seen since January, a best friend, the best man in my life, he said that he's just been busy. I'm working schooling and girlfriending and still can make time. Begging for friends to talk to, but they're just busy. Texts that are ignored and respond to others. Like completely uninterested while I'm suffering in silence. I don't get it. No wonder depression rates are so high. There just is no real tribe anymore. My buddies from high school are emotionless and reverse blame or lack empathy. Friends from college and after just seem to disregard and blame shift. I get life is life and it isn't a summer day of junior year with no plans, but they're just general disregard and lack of empathy. Self-reflection and crappiness hurts. Story 14. To sum it up, people don't care about you. Women don't care about you. You're viewed by most as an oppressor or a potential oppressor, or at best, a source of income and ego validation. Other men don't care about you. They're all desperate for the same things you're after, and they've been conditioned to not open up and discuss their feelings. Companies or governments don't care about you. You're a resource to be used and a pincushion to place most of their blames on. You're a fall guy to them. Otherwise, a lot of a man's life is to be ignored and disregarded. Don't talk back. Don't try to think you deserve more than you have. Just do the work you've been given and sacrifice for others. God, country, wife, until you pass away and are forgotten. If you're lucky, the only people who will truly give a crap about you will be your parents. If you're very lucky, then maybe also your wife or girlfriend. Welcome to the grind. Story 15. You're still supposed to be the strong and pursuing one, but also be emotional. But when you're emotional in the wrong scenario, you're a wuss. And when you're too demanding in the wrong scenario, you're pushy and don't respect boundaries. Also, you need to focus either on money or on having big muscles or six-pack or both. Short men also have it terrible as well as obese men. Body positivity is only for women. If a boy does girl things, it's still considered gay and perceived as a bad thing. Girls doing boy things is emancipated. If you're the man that cares for the children, most people will look down on you. Well, this is also true sometimes for SAH mothers. For men, it's much worse and more frequent. So basically, men are supposed to be emotional, but not too emotional. Strong, but not too strong. Rich, but not too rich. It's like trying to navigate a minefield while blindfolded and juggling flaming torches. Speaking of things you might want to keep private, ever wonder who's watching what you do online? Spoiler alert, it's everyone. Your internet provider, advertisers, hackers, even that one weird guy on public Wi-Fi. Now let's be real, your ISP can see your entire browsing history. Yes, even the incognito windows. Yeah, let that sink in for a second. Do you really want them knowing about that late-night research you've been doing? Didn't think so. That's where NordVPN comes in. With military-grade encryption, your data is locked down. Your IP, hidden. Your browsing history, completely private, even from your internet provider. Plus, with lightning-fast servers in over 118 countries, you can stream, shop, and game without lag or restrictions. No more annoying geo-blocks or buffering wheels, because online security isn't optional. It's essential. Protect your data. Protect your privacy, and maybe protect your dignity. Get NordVPN by clicking the link in the description. It's the best VPN out there. I've been using it at Rufus HQ for 2 years now. And if you use the link in the description,
you'll be supporting the channel and you'll get 70% off plus 6 months free by using our link.
Thanks for listening and supporting the channel. Now let's get back to the stories. Story 16. There's this idea that men have it so easy all the time and that they have no right to complain about anything. It's almost as if you constantly have to live with the idea that we're so lucky to have been born a man. Like you almost need to feel guilty for having it easier, especially as a white man. There's also a lot of generalizations. Like you need to apologize for the behavior of other men, or worse, you're seen as a certain kind of man, simply because you are a man. Not sure if I'm using the right words, and I also want to acknowledge the fact that we, as a society, are still far away from total equality. We should just be aware that we're not overdoing it, if that makes sense. Also, as a man, you can't be the victim of mistreatment in the eyes of some, because they enjoy it anyway, or they're not true men if they're unable to stand up against their oppressor. Story 17. Looked at as a second-class parent or a weirdo if you're a present parent. My wife and I are happily married with a daughter. However, even her own family will say things like how dad is going to babysit. It just seems to me like I'm looked at as being the secondary parent from the majority of people, and when I'm not, people look at me like I'm such a weirdo from strangers. I do worry about bringing my daughter around by myself because of my rotating work schedule. I often have weekdays off, but there's always someone giving me a side eye at the grocery store or wherever we are when we're out. She isn't quite old enough for the playground, but I am worried about those days in the future. Story 18. Never-ending loneliness. The entire worth of a man is purely based on how successful he is. I saw so many relationships in my life disappear as soon as I lost my job and went into depression. All your confidence and self-worth has to purely come from within. You'll never get a compliment. You'll never get someone to cheer you up even if you post something depressing. Won't get a helping hand or a random call to ask how everything is going. It's just depressing. No matter how hard you try to be empathetic, you will always be told horrible things because of nothing but gender. You're made to feel like a schmuck, whether you're successful or unsuccessful. Story 19. Double standards. Women are in a hive mind who are collectively responsible for every bad thing a woman does to a man. But apparently men are a hive mind who are collectively responsible for every bad thing a man does to a woman. Or at the very least, it's okay and understandable for a woman to behave that way. And we have to just take it, I guess. Moreover, good men are presumed to have some supernatural ability to connect with and command the respect of bad men and force them to change, as opposed to, being written off as victims of feminism or whatever. They have simply neglected to do so, presumably because we're just schmucks or something. Indeed, this is the prerequisite many feminists demand of good men before they stop actively belittling us and our problems. Of course, when good women are asked about the actions of bad women, they have nothing to do with it and can't possibly be expected to do anything about it because suddenly it's obvious to them that genders are not hive minds. They'll forget as soon as the conversation moves back to men. It's not all women's business that men don't feel emotionally safe sharing with them, and they'll quickly disavow women who make it unsafe for men to share by weaponizing their weakness against them, at least for the purposes of that specific conversation. But it's all men's business that women don't feel safe with men. And that way, we all apparently share the guilt and responsibility for whatever bad experiences she had. Literally just the homogeneity of the other applied to half of humanity. Story 20. I've never used any substances, drank alcohol, or smoked. I often get reactions like, "Are you for real?" Usually guys are like, "Dude, your life must be boring as heck." I don't usually respond, but, it's kind of sad that getting spiked is the highlight of most men's lives. My life isn't so boring that I need that. I have billions of ideas I want to bring to life and trillions of things I'd like to learn. A lot of men just lack interests. Not all of them, but a huge number. My older brother, for example, just comes home from work and drinks beer every evening. That's the coolest thing in his life. It's just sad. I try to show him how cool learning can be. I let him play my guitar whenever he wants. He still doesn't pick it up every evening, but he seems to enjoy it. I hope he develops a passion for learning because he talks about starting projects, but always puts it off until tomorrow. And well, tomorrow never comes. Story 21. As a man, I have to carry a lot of weight, both literally and figuratively. Literally, everyone asks me to carry couches and furniture. Some of it looks impossible for someone my size to carry, but somehow I make it happen. Nobody asks my sister to move anything because, wait for it, she's a girl. An entire gender expected to have hard labor free of charge and free of complaint. And then everyone wonders why our backs hurt at 35 and call us lazy when we just want to rest on the weekends. Then my sister that I live alone with complains I don't do enough dishes, but she forgets I also mow the lawn, including garden care, take out the trash, the recyclables, and lift anything heavy up and down 2 stories of stairs. I do plenty of dishes. Certainly more than half in exchange for dinner is the deal. I don't get dinner every day, but I certainly have to do the dishes every day. All the while she complains that I'm not doing enough, and I take it because she's in college. When you go to college, there's this sort of leniency that society gives you. Oh, she doesn't need a job, she's in college. Oh, she doesn't need to do as many chores, she's in college. As for the man who didn't go to college, or rather, I dropped out because I had too much physical labor and a demanding life, and like her, I don't get any leniency. I get the opposite. Oh, he deserves to suffer and work hard because he isn't in college. That damn bum. Here's another thing. I went and applied to my sister's job several years ago, and instead of putting me in the office with her, which is what I requested, where they needed people desperately, they took one look at my youth and the fact that I was a man and threw me into the warehouse on freaking night shift. That is the beauty of being a man. Our backs are used to fuel society. We carry the literal weight of society while females get desk jobs and complain about society being sexist against them while men get put on the back burner. I have lots of really good friends. I can cry to none of them. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 22. The hero's journey for men is crumbling. We're supposed to go forth and adventure. We're treated like cattle today, and there's little risk worth the reward. For me, I haven't had good mentors either. I still talk to a former boss who was my best boss, but he screwed me over before just as much as he's helped me. Fickle or crumbling job market. I've applied to almost all jobs available in my industry on LinkedIn, and Indeed, I will have applied to all within the next week. The work is just not there like it was the past 2 years. On top of that, nobody understands my job, so I get stuffed in the closet and forgotten somewhere with every job I take. I made enough money to take my family of 4 out to eat 3 or 4 times a paycheck and travel around once or twice just last year. Now we're just able to pay bills and go out once, if lucky. I don't have a big house, and things like our cars are paid off. If men complain about this stuff, we get told that they could be worse, or, well, you could just do X job that either couldn't support a family or would take more years of training or schooling. Worry that World War III will start any day because of geriatric idiot bureaucrats across the globe whose lineage will be preserved to degree, while myself and or my children may have to fight. Lack of meaningful friendships. I had a large group of friends that lasted long after high school, but now I really only talk to one friend. The rest are further down the chain than I am. No family, no prospects, only video games. I've attempted to make new friends, but nothing lasts long. My dad is a great man, but he was never home growing up. My mom passed away a month before she got to meet her first grandchild. Dad took up with a parasite of a girl almost 30 years younger than him. He's lost his marbles. We don't talk. Not being able to discuss that we've gotten close to depression, but don't really want to do it. I talked to a therapist, which I won't be able to soon, even with insurance, and it's hard articulating what I have going on without revealing the S word. I know it's not a good thing and I don't want to do it. I can talk about it without doing it, but if I do, I'll get canned. Story 23. This is a mature female perspective. Men are in a mental health crisis. Loneliness, lacking emotional connection to another person, be it with another guy or a female, is debilitating. Someone needs to spearhead a community roundtable to address how to change the culture of loneliness with men. Men of all generations are in crisis. After retirement, older men realized the only friends they had were in the workplace. Younger men moving to a new city struggle to find new male friends. Going to breweries and sucking down beer is not the answer. Maybe start a meetup group to tackle the issue. Try to enlist a panel of men who are psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists, counselors. Hey, you guys are great at organizing elaborate fantasy football groups. Take that same enthusiasm and organize an event on how to solve this issue. Story 24. Our gender is demonized. I understand women have problems with their gender being judged, but I'm sorry, I would much rather be a pick-me, attention queen, etc., than a predator or a creep. Innocent men think saying hi to a woman will label them as a creep or predator. Expressing our gender is now horrible. Me Too is great for exposing cruel men and predators, but to be fair, these types of men don't care for the law. They have no morals or empathy. Take the average man now. He has no nefarious intentions, but he already feels as if he expresses his interest, he'd be a creep. Now women are scratching their head thinking, I'm giving this guy hints to approach me, but he isn't doing it. No man is. Story 25. Men now have all the responsibilities and burdens of the equal privileges. Men are expected to uphold traditional norms while also being modern. We're still expected to be the breadwinners, protectors, and leaders, but also share in homemaking and childcare. This is good, but all burdens should be shared. Women should be expected to provide, rather than pursue their dreams as men have. They should be expected to fend for themselves or protect men from perceived dangers. They should take initiative in relationships and spoil men. Story 26. The same problems many people face in general. The world of contradictions we find ourselves in. We are expected to open up about our feelings, yet when we do, there is often no one willing or able to listen. The fact that opportunities for advancement in the workplace are not actually based on merit, so there goes the work hard and it will happen mantra. The polarizing political spectrum that allows virtually no room for free thought or open debate, as doing so will often remove the support networks most people sign on to them for. The expectation that your life should be a never-ending highlight reel, and the constant disappointment that it is not. And lastly, human nature. The belief that we hold some kind of special place in the universe that gives us the right to judge others negatively, lie or cheat or steal under the pretense of free enterprise. The near complete lack of honesty and accountability with oneself and actions. There's a line in the Kevin Smith film Dogma where Bartleby says to Loki, "These humans were given paradise and they destroyed it." The older I get, the more I believe it. Story 27. Loss of constructive and supportive man-only spaces. Boy Scouts is a huge example of this. I'll admit I was one of the girls who was upset about not being allowed in BSA, but I grew up and now I realize how important it is for guys to have a constructive space for just them. There are so many women-centric spaces that it just seems like we're leaving men behind. In a similar vein, the demonization of a hobby if it's catering to a male audience. What's so wrong with a Warhammer 40k or video gaming or martial arts or Dungeons and Dragons community being mostly men? Or shown in anime having a mostly male demographic? These are spaces that guys used to be pestered for occupying. Now they're pestered for occupying them once again and expected to turn over their hobbies to the general public. Things are celebrated for being by women for women. So why do men have to open up their hobbies for a wider audience? I know these seem trivial compared to the big issues listed in this thread, but I've seen the difference having a space for only the guys makes. And they're willing to let others in if you're genuinely passionate about the hobby. But the issue is, many aren't. They're only in it for the trend. Take over the space, change it to suit their tastes, and move on. The influencers of hobbies. And it seems to be a huge issue for hobbies that cater to men, which are often the first point of constructive male spaces. So it all ties back. I think the reason we see so many men getting into gym culture is because it is a constructive hobby space, where they won't get judged by their fellow gym goers and will find support, even if it is only for the workout. Story 28. For me, I'm nearly 30, have no No good friends, no partner, no family. I relate to the past having the same lineage, and I don't really have anything worth mentioning past usual adult things. I worked on myself and my career through my whole 20s, but it has just left me alone and feeling like there's no meaning to absolutely anything. I used to like traveling, but a recent solo trip really highlighted how lonely I was, and while I spoke to some new people while I was away, it isn't going to lead to anything meaningful. I'm also really tired of putting effort in to try and form connections and it being very one-sided. And I've sadly found myself putting in less and less towards no effort with people at all now. Just an empty shell. I started therapy to see if that could lead to some positivity, but it hasn't really helped so far. Story 29. Being underappreciated. You'll often find yourself having to please everyone around you just to keep them happy, all while you go often underperceived. Rarely do you hear a family go out of their way to show dad appreciation or celebrate it. It's expected of men to bust their back and not complain. Just be there in the background, taking care of crap while the rest of the family revels in the spoils. Story 30. From my experience, a modern problem that men face that I haven't seen listed is the constant requirement to be competitive with practically everything. Some examples. Growing up, you can't just be okay at something. You have to be great at it. If it's not a sport or physical activity, it's music, academics, or something as simple as just being funny. You're always competing against your peers to amount to something. This begins at a young age and works its way into adulthood. We see so many men so hyper-focused on their modern version of what it is to be somebody. Men chasing after success, women, status, power. Men chasing the next big thing, comparing, competing against other men. Men who do not find a way out of the state of being usually end up having a hard time relating to others. End up burnt out because they're so wrapped up in their constant need to affirm this worldview that's been instilled in them, constantly wrapped up in grasping outwards. There's no time to look inwards, let alone even realize this is a skill to be learned. Even taking the time to reach this skill is a challenging and painful process, because when a majority of your life is spent looking outwards towards achievements to gain a sense of self, you end up realizing that inside, you're empty. What sense of self does a man have if he does not know who he is? He isn't his car, his career, or the man that he simply set out to appear to be. He's lost. The man who is nowhere near successful struggles all the same, but its manifestation is a completely different illustration of how it's expressed. In conclusion, most modern men do not know who they are, and do not know how to realize who they are, and it's strongly tied to societal pressures and expectations of who they should be, and how they should behave. To me, this is a major cause of depression rates, loneliness, and difficulty connecting to the self, such as feeling safe crying. To me, this is one of the major root issues happening with men that doesn't even factor in the other compiling issues that they face. Story 31. Finding a sensible and healthy balance between being masculine but also empathetic and understanding to softness. I think Scott Galloway has a really strong sense of what it means to be a modern man and explains it really well in Diary of a CEO, but also in his podcast. On a more personal note, a few years ago I really fell down the alt-right rabbit hole. I always knew I wasn't homophobic. I was reasonably progressive. I just didn't understand some stuff, but everything I saw in my online spaces was telling me that I, a 20-something white male, was the cause of every other person's pain in the world. It made me depressed. I was logically told, you don't know what it's like to be in other people's shoes. But apparently everybody understands my life down to a T because I was seemingly straight, white, and male. I'm proudly a lefty, but my allies close to me have to understand that constantly telling 14-year-old boys that they're the problem is not good for their mental health. And of course, they will turn to clowns like Andrew Tate. Somewhat similar to Republicans or conservatives, I disagree almost entirely with what they sell and how they do it, but if you constantly tell these people, you're the devil for accepting that person, they're going to move further and further away. Suddenly Bush turns into Trump and Joe Rogan turns into Tate. I will always be supportive of minority groups and their oppression, but when every minority group bands together to say men are the problem, specifically white men, that isn't a David versus Goliath thing anymore, at least not in the way people perceive it. Story 32. Several. In the USA in particular, where ADHD runs more rampant among men than women, we face the following. Lack of work, or life, or health inclusion. Our job should not have men chained to desks doing nothing physical. We need to be hunting saber-toothed tigers or whatever. The rampant behavior of our culture has sold men the lie that they need to be fooling around with women constantly to be manly. That's a lie and also unhealthy. This behavior also contributes to our chronic mental overstimulation, which is why so many men have ADHD diagnoses. We're having to throw off the shackles of mental health myths. More men of the millennial generation are seeking counseling and therapy, which is great. We needed to deprogram ourselves from the mental tapes installed in us by our parents. Most of these tapes are full of outdated data, given how radically the culture has shifted. Culture has shifted so much that men are really no longer needed. At the very least, the separation between them and women is eroding quickly, even more so for boys and girls. While I'm pro-integration in most things, the lack of spaces specifically for either intimacy precludes some of the intense bonding and growth facilitated by being alone with others of your like mind. Story 33. Whenever problems are identified, you're not really allowed to discuss it. We can acknowledge the problems, sure, but any attempt to have a serious discussion about causes or solutions is routinely shut down by people arguing in bad faith and gaslighting you as a misogynist. Story 34. Radical feminism. Honestly, it is totally okay and acceptable to openly and passionately hate the entire male gender these days, and to invalidate every disadvantage we face or success that we've had. It's almost fashionable for most young people under 35 to broadly dislike the male gender. Nobody defends us besides people like Jordan Peterson. Lol. It becomes exhausting as a young man trying to find his way in the world. Story 35. The biggest problem men face is that nobody with the power to enact change is interested in engaging with the issues men face. Additionally, most people are ignorant and stigmatize any discussion of real issues. If we're lucky, we'll get useless advocacy, e.g., most men cry, blah, blah, blah. That's not the problem. Men don't end themselves because they can't cry or are less likely to cry. How about tackling the systemic issues instead for once, like we try to with women's issues? Basically, the biggest problem is we have problems, and unlike other groups, nobody who's able to is willing to help. Story 36. Women literally treat me rude as hell on a daily basis. I'm tall, but that doesn't mean I'm going to attack you. Women cross the street when I'm walking, they grab their mace, clutch their purse, roll up their windows. I'm not a creep. I'm just tall. This has really messed up my mental health, and I go to therapy for the way women treat me in public. I never used to be like this. Women generally fear and hate masculine men these days. I just wish women were nice to me. My depression will be the end of this BS. Maybe then people will listen and believe what I go through. Story 37. They literally have no one to talk to about their mental health, not even their spouses. I've seen men sitting in their cars in parking lots after coming back from office just to enjoy a few minutes of freedom, because they know there's chaos waiting at home as well. Not the wife, but the whole ecosystem there. They just can't go to their friend and rant how miserably they're feeling. No one's going to listen to a whiner. Men are supposed to be strong. They need to put up a brave face for every situation, even if they're feeling like crap inside. It is said, you cannot always be strong, but you can always be brave. But why? I just don't get it. Story 38. Earning a good living. Around 900 euros a week as a contractor for 10 hours work. 25-year-old me would be foaming at the mouth for that kind of money. I would have imagined a lavish lifestyle. The reality is that it's not enough to pay for normal things in Dublin. Stuff needs repairing. Teeth need fixing. Kids need schooling. Wife wants more security. Bills need paying. Eventually, earning what I thought would be a good living amount of money ends up just feeling like a never-ending battle to earn more to keep bills getting paid. I'm so tired. I'm also studying 3 days a week and taking care of my 10-month-old daughter 3 days a week while my wife works. Story 39. It's interesting reading through all the comments and seeing so many either blaming or bringing up women. We need to create a society that supports and validates the emotional needs of men, and it sounds like supportive groups or communities need to primarily be created and led by men. It sounds like men need friends, other guys that can be open with without judgment, maybe while doing an activity at the same time. Society is too isolationist. Story 40. The biggest problem modern men face is that they exist in a world that mocks and loathes who they are. We had a generation where we did not treat boys, but as dysfunctional girls. These boys are growing to be men in a world that hates them, and they have been taught to hate themselves. Story 41. A lack of purpose, at least in my opinion. Men often open up best around other men. Your mates, your fellow strugglers in the mortal coil. But men need purpose beyond simply work, especially at a corporate level or office job. And with a lot of modern-day society diminishing men's mental health struggles and targeting swaths of the male support network, gym culture, sports clubs, pubs, in the name of stamping out toxic masculinity, they leave little left in their wake. The result being a generation who lack purposeful existence, who feel isolated from their fellow man, of all genders, and who are subconsciously told every day that anything more traditionally masculine is wrong and toxic. Story 42. Not to make this political, but it's hard not to. Reading the comments, does it really surprise anyone why a person like Trump comes along touting all the nonsense and hate that he does and still has a rabid following? I hate the guy, but what other politician has harnessed the feelings of men, particularly white men in any recent age? It's no wonder people still cling to him. no one really gives a crap about men, then a schmuck like him comes along and uses those emotions that we're expected to bottle up to make us feel good, even if it hurts others. Read the comments from men and their experiences, and think about the BS that's been happening in the world, particularly the last 6 years. Story 43. I just thought of another one. Men's rooms without changing tables for kids. That's one that really angered me when my little guy was a baby. This wasn't just at small businesses either. I remember being at USF with my kid and having to change him. This is a huge university, yet they couldn't be bothered to have a changing table in the men's room. Naturally, I just changed him on a table in the study area in the middle of the building. I didn't even care if he had a blowout. Let the school deal with that crap if he gets on the table. They're lucky I didn't walk to the cafeteria to change him. Story 44. The biggest problem is that women have objectively achieved parity with men in everything they fought for, but our discourse is still frozen in 2008. According to Forbes, the controlled gender pay gap has been 100% closed. Men are more likely to be victimized by violent crime, yet all we hear about is violence against women. Men are equally likely to be subject to DV, but we still pretend like men can't be victims. In schools, men are discriminated against as teaching continues to be female-dominated and thus matriarchal in its culture. Women now earn 63% of bachelor's degrees. Yet we still have female-only scholarships, schools, etc., with no equivalent for men. In fact, as we have seen women achieve parity, there has been an increased push for female representation without recognizing the other side of that coin. Story 45. I'm just now learning how to have, feel, and express emotions, and I'm in my 20s. Society has so many pressures to just keep pushing that it literally drove me crazy. And I've done things that I'm not proud of, but managed to not need to be hospitalized. Also, as a guy who is very social and loves being out, I've learned to adapt to crowds in a very odd way. I act a certain way around men and do every possible to not come off as a creep and around women and children. I love kids. Their innocence and wonder inspires me. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.